Often my students that come from Afghanistan, Ukraine, Myanmar often say, "Grandpa, you get so emotional." And my answer is always, how can I not get emotional? I've come to know them quite well. I've come to know their names. I've come to know their ages. I easily recognize their voices when my Afghan students talk to me, even though that they're not able to show their faces because of the fear and the risk of maybe somebody hacking into our lesson and then knowing who is actually there. But I recognize their voices. And I recognize their laughter, and I know every one of them's hopes and dreams. But really, the beginning of all this goes back to this date, September the 10th, in many ways, back 1973. That's me standing next to my mother, who had just turned 50 years old. What an incredible day that was. My mom was not someone that enjoyed being photographed. As you can tell, she kind of looking at my brother James, who's holding the camera. It's like, don't take my photograph. She just never, ever felt comfortable. But I remember kind of holding her arms and saying, you know, Mom, it's your birthday. You're turning 50. But she would not listen. What an incredibly happy moment that was. What I had no idea was just about to happen was the next day was really going to be the beginning of a total change in my life. For those of you that know a little bit about the country of Chile, where I was actually born, September 11th, 1973, there was a coup. And those 24 hours have been literally stuck in my mind for all these years. And what led from there was that from that September 11th date to December the 7th, basically decisions were made that would basically make this little 11-year-old have to leave his country of birth. What was really difficult at the time was the fact that it was literally the country had shut down. They were not allowing many people to leave. And I will never forget when my mom said, "You're leaving." And I remember saying to her, "Where are we leaving?" And she says, "Not, David, not where we are leaving, where you're leaving." And I looked at her and said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "It's too dangerous for the whole entire family to leave. So you're going to have to leave the country with your older brother. And you're going to make it look like you're just going on a holiday, cross the border into Peru, and basically establish yourselves there." It was an extremely difficult moment for me. I will never forget when she approached me and she said, "David, here's a suitcase. And what I want you to do is to go around the house and pick those things that will remind you of who you are. Because you're going to be encountering and experiencing things that are going to be extremely difficult. I wish Mom and Dad would be there with you, but we're not." We crossed this river, fairly wide river, literally in the middle of the monsoon season. So the flow of this river was just incredible. It was dark brown water with logs literally just floating down at what it seemed like fast speed. And I remember sort of thinking, is it going to be safe? My brother, who was keeping very quiet, we got onto this little canoe and we managed to get to the other side. As we crossed to the other side, somebody was actually waiting for him there that he was in contact with. And the next 48 hours literally just changed a lot in terms of the little boy in terms of who David was and how he viewed the world, how he felt about safety, how he felt about danger, and all those things that come with experiencing trauma. It was almost like every day was just another layer. I remember getting to the other side, and as we met this person, I was waiting for him. The conversation, it was something like this, very close to what was said, and I'm translating obviously from the Spanish. He said, who is this? As he's talking to my brother, and my brother says, well, this is my little brother David. And this fellow says, so what is he doing here? And well, I'm taking care of him. It says, well, do you realize where you're going, which was further into the Amazon, there is no school. So you really have no choice but to, I think what we're going to have to do is leave him in this little town right here. Now, when I say town, that's kind of a big word because really it was just a village in the middle of nowhere. So my brother listens to him, and then he looks at me, and then basically was like, well, I guess you're staying here. And I will never forget sort of his face as he's looking at me, and I will definitely never forget how I was feeling, realizing that my parents were like 6,000 kilometers away, and now my brother, who was really my umbilical cord to sort of keeping, sort of emotionally well, was suddenly going to be going to another town further in. But I ended up having to live in the town of Tocachi. And I need to say to you that, often I share with my students what it was like to live in the Amazon, but one of the things that I don't share with them is that feeling of being away from family and being away from friends and so on that first night. I will never forget that first night. The terror that I felt as suddenly, and as it happens where, in the regions that you're close to the equator, darkness came fairly early. And I will never forget being in that room and suddenly just finding myself totally alone. I thought I knew what the word alone was. Of course, I had heard the word many times, I feel lonely, I'm alone, and so on. But this was a feeling that I had never experienced before. A feeling of total abandonment. A feeling of being so totally away from anything and everything that I knew to be familiar, and people that I loved and I cared for and that I was connected to. Suddenly all that was just simply gone. And I remember in the total just darkness of this room, just crying like I had never cried before. I remember that as I was crying, I remember hearing my brother's voice saying, David, you will need this at night. And as I had my little suitcase under the bed there, I remember just grabbing it and touching it and opening it, but suddenly it's like, David, you will need this at night. I remember grabbing this little box and putting my hand in it, and I had no idea what was in it. And when I put my hand in it, I felt candles, and I felt matches. And I remember in that darkness of that, what it felt was just literally just total, just darkness. There was just absolutely no light. I remember lighting that candle and seeing the little flame that was so tiny, so minute, but yet it really truly represented, that things somehow for this 12-year-old by then were going to be okay. It didn't stop me from crying, but at least it provided me with a line somewhat into a future that I was totally unaware of, but that things were going to be fine. I will never forget the next day when I was there waiting because somebody had said, somebody's going to come and pick you up to take you to the school. And I will never forget just waiting when Sally approached me and said, "You're David, I am, you're going to be your teacher. I'm going to be, taking you to the school." And I remember just walking to the school, and needless to say, kids are looking at me. Again, this is the middle of the Amazon, and they're going like, "Who is this kid?" I obviously spoke with a different accent, I looked different and so on, and I remember hearing these little voices in the background saying, "Who is this?" And when did he arrive and all that. And obviously sort of teacher was also hearing this. But what happened next is really in so many ways what defined for me the incredible potential of our careers, being teachers. I won't forget as we went into the backyard, and he was showing me, the school here, we teach kids how to go and take care of the sugar cane plantation and take care of the pigs and the cattle, and you're going to learn how to use your machete to make sure, to clear the land and so on. I will never forget how he said to the kids that were there, "Let's sit on the ground." And we sat on the ground, and I remember there, just as he was sitting there with us, and there I'm sitting, kind of trying not to look at the kids next to me, wondering, what was going to happen next. I will never forget his words because they really, truly have followed me throughout my whole career. He said, "This is David. He's a new student here in the town of Tocache. He just arrived. He came from Chile. His parents are not here. So you can imagine how difficult it is for David to be here." So he said, and looking at me, he says, "David, you're now one of the family. We're going to take care of you. You're not alone. We can't imagine what you must be going through at this moment, being away from your parents, being away from your brother, but we're here for you." And those few words literally just transformed that moment that I need to say to you was just total fear of anxiety, stress, to a moment where suddenly I felt the warmth and love, unconditional love from an individual, a teacher, who knew what the role of a teacher was, and that was to care for his students. So I thought many times, and people have asked me, really, why did you get involved doing this work, supporting children overseas? Really, that's where the seed was planted. And they were looking for educators that would be able to give just 1 hour of their time, whenever they could, to connect with these kids that in this very moment, as Russian tanks and helicopters and missiles were striking cities, for those 60 minutes to let them know that somebody on the other side of the world was thinking about them. And not just simply thinking, was taking the time to getting to know them and build those important bridges of kindness, compassion, love, especially those moments when somebody is feeling fear and is feeling like literally they have been abandoned. I remember raising my hand immediately, and I replied and I said, "Look, I'm David. I'm a teacher in the little town of Kikiktorjak, north of 60, off little island off the coast of Baffin Island, literally about 350 kilometers from Greenland. I wonder if the kids would be interested in learning what it's like to live in the Canadian Arctic." I said, "I can talk about bears, I can talk about igloos, I can talk about the Inuit people here, the things that I've learned." And within 24 hours, I got a reply back saying, "We would love to have you." So it was said that on Saturday, March the 12th, 2022, I would give my first class. Here I am in my office, and I had two of my colleagues, Charlotte and David Sims, there with me. I invited them. I said, David, Charlotte, I realize that we're all experts at doing Zoom, but this is different. I'm going to be talking to children that are right now experiencing the horrors of violence, where they feel that whatever was in control, like it was for me on September the 10th, 1973, now that's gone. Where just being able to walk down the street in your own neighborhood can't be done anymore. Where in some cases, some of those children have had to move somewhere else in Ukraine. I said, I need you to be here with me so that you can provide me some feedback after to let me know whether or not my session was okay. So they took that photograph there. The intention was literally to just do one session. I thought, I'm going to do that one session, and just left it at that. I will never forget when those kids began to show up. Over 300 kids showed up to meet somebody on the other side of the world who was just about to start a lesson on polar bears and northern lights and igloos and the beautiful people, the Inuit. I remember them listening intensely, but once in a while you would see somebody going, Mr. David, Mr. David. And I had a host there that was ready to translate if necessary. I have a question for you. Oh, I had my lesson plan, as every teacher would have done. 60 minutes worth of activities, assessments, little questions here and there. I knew within the first few minutes, and I remember those questions. Mr. David, and I'm thinking, okay, they're going to ask about polar bears. Mr. David, what is your favorite ice cream flavor? I will never forget that first question, because it kind of like, what does this have to do with the polar bears? Didn't. But really what these questions were about, they wanted to know who that person on the other side of the world was. And isn't that about teaching? It's about establishing relationships. It's not just simply going into a classroom saying, hey, I'm a math teacher, physics teacher, let's get on it. Those connections must happen. And I found out that these kids, even though they were literally thousands of miles away, they were not any different than the kids that I had taught around the world and I had met and have come to love and consider in so many ways my children. So I said, Neapolitan ice cream. And then the next question, what is your favorite dinner? Your favorite food? I said, I love pasta and pizza. Boy, if I could have pasta and pizza every day, I would. I know it wouldn't be healthy, but I love the flavor. I love how it feels in your mouth. And the kids were themselves sharing their stories. The next thing I know, the host is saying, David, 5 minutes left. And I'm going like 5 minutes. So the first thing that I did, I will never forget this. I'm looking at my little lesson plan. I'm going like, I need at least another 3 hours. Those 60 minutes literally flew. And I was so touched by these kids. That evening, I received an email from Alex, who's the little boy that you see at the top there. And I, by the way, I asked prior to getting started on this first session, I asked the host, I said, are you okay that I take screenshots? And he said, that's fine. This is Alex. My name is Alex. I'm 11 years old. I'm from Ukraine. Thank you for the lessons. It was very interesting. When I grow up, I will travel around the world, and I hope I will visit Canada one day, and I would like to learn more about Canada. I like pizza and pasta too. I remember that following this text, I sent an email to the host who had contacted me, and I said, I would love to come for a second time if possible. And she replied, said, David, we would love to have you back. So, have you back 30 months later. One of the things that I've learned throughout these last 30 months, everything that we do really is about connections. We're currently teaching courses from linear algebra, and I often joke about that because I don't really know what linear algebra is. If any math teachers here, you probably know what linear algebra is. But I say to all my colleagues that are volunteering for Classrooms Without Walls, you're going to have the opportunity to teach those things that you love teaching in school, or perhaps that you do currently as a hobby. But one of the things that you have to remember is that ultimately what the goal of these lessons, it's about connecting with these kids. That feeling of abandonment is very real. One of my Afghan students sent me a text. It said the following: I wish somebody would just simply drop a nuclear bomb on Afghanistan so the world would forget about us. I want them to know that the world has not forgotten them, that we're here, and that there are people, individuals throughout the world that are ready to let them know that, look, we care about you. There's not one session when I'm saying to my students, I love each one of you. And they come back and say, we love you too. March the 12th was the first date of the first session. And really out of that first session, we started the Teachers for Ukraine program. Currently, we provide ESL classes, all levels. We need volunteers. And we provide general topics. I've had teachers, retired teachers in Ontario, teaching these kids how to grow tomato plants. Is it really at the end, that lesson, really, is it really about teaching kids how to grow tomato plants? It's about letting these kids know that somebody on the other side of the world cares. That when night comes and they're hearing those sounds outside their doors, outside their bedrooms, and they're hearing people yelling, and they're hearing people swearing, and they're hearing people crying, that there's somebody out there that knows what they're going through. Mother Teresa was asked the question, what is the greatest tragedy that this world experiences? Those reporters that were at the meeting, and I'm paraphrasing, thought that she was going to say, hunger, and those are tragedies, obviously. Disease, they thought she would say. War and all these things. You know what her answer was? The number of people that feel alone, that feel that nobody cares about them. When I was in that little house in the Amazon jungle, yes, I was being fed. But that feeling and thinking and believing that nobody cared for me was very real. Very real. On September the 12th, a colleague of mine, I worked in Myanmar, contacted me and said, David, I've been following what you're doing in Ukraine. Do you think that we can do something similar for Myanmar? Myanmar, in February the 1st, 2021, experienced a coup. Aung San Suu Kyi, de facto leader of the country, was put in prison, and she's still there. And now, since that time, over 50,000 people have been killed. Over 2 million children are internally displaced. So on September the 12th, we started the Teachers for Myanmar program. I need to tell you, for every one of these jumps that we've made, it never fails that I think, how the heck are we going to do this? But that has immediately followed with, it will happen. There are lots of people out there that care. They just need to find out about the work that we're doing, and they will join. So we moved forward on September the 12th. We started the Teachers for Myanmar program, and currently we offer ESL classes, all levels, GED courses, where kids are working towards their high school diploma. We also provide university courses to Kachin State Comprehensive University students that are currently hiding in the Myanmar jungle. And they're hiding with their professors. And they have to move from one place in the jungle to another just to be able to escape the junta that are following them. Literally, every time that they get to a spot, they can't spend much time there because they find where they are located and they begin to bomb the villages. So currently, we have a group of university professors from KSCU, as well as students that are taking our courses. And I have, luckily, have found wonderful colleagues who have gotten involved, and they're doing all sorts of courses, beautiful courses. There's one that just joined and will start fairly soon that will be teaching everything about cattle and how to take care of cattle. He's a retired vet from Lethbridge. And then we have the general topics. And the general topics can literally go from playing Pokemon cards with these kids to learning them how to do line dancing, how to do yoga. These are actually examples of what we're doing. Sometimes I hear, well, I'm not sure if I can do this. Well, do you like growing tomato plants? As I was driving to work in December 2022, I was listening to CBC radio, and I was hearing what was happening in Afghanistan. And my heart literally was just having such a hard time just containing it, just in terms of the feelings that I was feeling, that this is a terrible situation. This is not just a tragedy for Afghanistan. This is a world tragedy. Whatever happens somewhere else, we're at a time period in our world history where things are felt, like immediately. And I remember thinking and feeling, for these girls, basically from grade 7 up, university, where they were just literally told, that's it, no more. No more school for you. Yes, we know that you're literally a semester off from becoming a nurse or a medical doctor, but that's it. You're going to be now at home. So I remember getting to work, and it was like contacting my colleagues, and I said, we need to start the Teachers for Afghanistan program. What was the immediate feeling that I had when I said that? How the heck am I going to do this? But that immediately followed with, I know that there are people out there, teachers out there, who are going to find out about this new program, and they're going to join Classrooms Without Walls. And that's exactly what has happened. We also have the Winds of Change Leadership Youth Program. These are kids from Ukraine, and you're going to meet them in the next few minutes. They just recently completed writing a 122-page book. These are kids coming from not just their homelands, but they're literally right now connected with each other through the power of Zoom. I'd like to introduce to you the following dear friends, family members, people that I truly love and that I've come to know now for all this time. I'm going to start with top left. Dear Carol, so wonderful to see you here. Math teacher coming from Chicago. She'll be sharing with you her experience connecting with our students. To her right, Susan, who is currently in Alberta and who has been working very closely with the Winds of Change kids. And what an inspiration she is. She's the one that has provided the support for this 122-page book titled Amaze to be completed. Now, with us here, bottom left, is Kat from Myanmar. By the way, it's almost 1:30 in the morning for her right now, Saturday morning. Kat is from Myanmar. In the center, we have Sophia, who was in that first session that I ever taught for Ukrainian kids. Back in March, as I was traveling to Ukraine, I had the pleasure of meeting Sophia and her parents as they live in exile now in Italy. And what an incredible experience that was. To bottom right, my bottom right is Adila, who was one of my first Afghan students. I will never forget, Adila, your text where she's telling me that she had an iPhone, a cell phone with her, and unfortunately for that first session, her cell phone was not working. And she was trying to use it to communicate. And she sent me this text soon after, an email basically saying, I'm so sorry that I could not speak, but I promise. And prior to this, she shares with me who she is, her family story. She says, I promise that I will attend all your classes, and I'm going to be going to my friend's house, and she has a computer.